Hello, gamers and goomers. How the hell are you doing? It's been a
Oh
couple of
no.
weeks, but we are back with the SuperShow podcast. I am Alex Jones, your host today, and over there, sweating in the wings as I embarrass him in public on live podcasting goodness is Jamie. Hello, mate.
It's fine. It's fine. I'm used to it by now. We've been doing this for long enough. I am slightly curious as to whether I'm a gamer or a goomer.
I think you're a
Uh,
gamer.
okay. For a second there, I thought you were going to go gamers and groomers, which I'm not saying wouldn't describe our audience, but then also, again, maybe a little bit hot to come out, out in the first seconds of a podcast.
I was trying to think like if it's like boys and girls, that kind of thing, and then I was like, what gamers and who are there? I was like, well, the people who watch games but don't play. Could you call them? I think goomers would be a good term for goom, like
Goomers.
the girlfriends and the
I just think,
boyfriends and the partners who just are nearby and don't actually play, but they take part on the periphery.
oh, right, I see. What's the thing they have in football? Wags. You're trying to get the
Wags.
video game equivalent of wags, which I don't know if that's an international term at this point. It might be very English.
What
Do they have wags in the NFL?
Habs, would that be
Habs.
husbands and boyfriends? Wives and girlfriends is wags. Husbands and boyfriends be habs.
Oh, I see, because we need to cover our bases these days,
Yep.
you know,
Cover everyone.
because girl gamers are real.
They are. They're apparently a big old section of the market. See, but that's why gamers is such a great term, because it covers everybody. It is non-gender discriminatory. I'll have you know.
Just like goomers.
Goomers is because
Not to be confused with groomers
not
or
groomers.
coomers.
Nope, goomers, and it's not a mean term. It might sound a little bit off, but anyway, enough goomer talk. We're back after 2 weeks. I was on holiday last week. Apologies for that. So that's why we weren't here. I was away with the fam. And this week, despite being under the weather and despite having the mother of all colds, I don't know, it's a bit of a cold. I'm hamming up a little bit.
Well,
Jamie is here. So if his voice doesn't sound quite as full and thick, but it'll be thick in other ways this week with phlegm.
oh god,
It's 'cause
now
it's
hanging
not.
out we're triggering people now. I worried. Yeah, but we had to, I guess, acknowledge it because people were gonna. Anyone with an aversion to a slightly nasal voice is probably already turned off this podcast. That said, anyone with a kink for it might be jaying it right now, which is music to my ear. I just like that's how I like to imagine all of our listeners. You know how they say if you're nervous about doing a presentation on a work trip, imagine everyone naked. I imagine all of our listeners and all of our viewers just jerking it all the time.
To just listening to this every time you talk, they go for it.
Yeah, if every time someone does a super chat on YouTube, I just imagine them jaying it with one hand and super chatting with the other.
Lovely. Lovely. Anyway, in case you wondered, we are in fact a video game podcast. You can reach out to us on YouTube or Twitter at Super Show. We are available on all major podcasting platforms. We're talking Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, anywhere else that you might get your podcasts from. We're also on paisleyradio.com Thursdays 10 p.m, repeated on Mondays at 10 p.m. should you want to catch us there. We're all over the shop. And Jamie, because this is one of the early ones of the month, it is only the 4th on the day of recording. We're now going to do the fun little section. I can never remember who it was who suggested it, but we like to do it at the beginning of every month, and this is giving you the rundown of a few of the games that are going to be coming out. This is not a comprehensive list because some of the games we don't care about. To be fair, some of the list we don't really care about, but we put them in because we think you might. Because we are, as we said, we're inclusive. Gamers and goomers, we're inclusive. We like to include people from all, it's not a kink, but all types of game love. Anyone who likes, if you like JRPGs, if you like beat 'em ups, we're there for you, even though we don't play them. So there we go.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any exception to that rule. Like maybe if you were just like way, way, way into Genshin Impact to the point that that's the only thing you played. Even then, I
I'm
don't think
fine
we'd
with that.
exclude you.
No, date
No, but
date
we'd put them in their own
simulators.
pool.
It's the date
Never,
simulators. They don't count.
date,
They're not games. Come on,
I don't
man.
know. You telling me you've never found yourself getting a little hot under the collar playing Dream Daddy Simulator? What was it called? It was just called Dream Daddy, wasn't it?
Something like that. Dream. I did play one of those games, and it was fine, but it was kind of boring. And then I cheated because I just downloaded some cheats for it because it was boring. So
You just installed Cheat Engine and found the entry for penis size and maxed it out, and that was
Exactly.
essentially completing the game.
That is how you complete the game, yeah. But no, anyway, hey, let's get back to it, because the June game releases that we're talking about, we've got Destiny 2, The Final Shape, which is coming to PC, PlayStation, Xbox, across the board on 4th of June. That is today. Exciting. Get your hands on that. The Smurfs Village Party is coming to all platforms on the 6th of June. Then on the 11th of June, we've got V Rising coming to PlayStation 5. My God, that game is too addicting, and I only started playing it a little while ago, and I already cannot stop.
I did not see that coming.
Actually, something has made me stop, but we'll get onto that later because I've been playing something else. You already know what it is. Monster Hunter Stories is coming to PC, Switch, and PlayStation 4 on the 14th of June. Still Wakes the Deep is coming on the 18th of June to PC, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series XS. By the way, Jamie, I will say stop me if you want to go deep on any of these titles, by the way. We've got Shin Megami...
I'm just going to let you roll. I'm just happy listening.
We've got Shin Megami Tensei Vengeance, which comes to PC, Switch, PlayStation 4, PS5, Xbox, 21st of June. And then Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree DLC. The thing that has got everyone J in it, apparently, is coming on the 21st of June, wherever you have to be playing Elden Ring. Yeah.
How are you spelling that?
With lots of U's. Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble was coming to Switch on the 25th of June, and then Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is coming to Switch on the 27th of June. And the last one here I've got is Tchia, which is coming to Switch on the 27th of June.
Weird month, right? It's slightly odd. And I'm not going to necessarily say indicative of the way that the year's playing out, but when you look at a month like June, now historically the strongest month, and it feels like across the board the strongest or the most interesting release, at least in terms of what you'd expect to be a hit commercially, is a piece of DLC. Admittedly, for one of the biggest games of the last, well, however many years you want to go back, it paints a slightly unusual picture of a quieter time.
Yeah, and it's also obviously a massive month with regards to news and launches and things. So there's obviously always the chance that we'll get some shadow drops, we'll get some surprises that have been sort of held back. But you're absolutely right. It is a. But then I suppose maybe that's the point. Maybe most of the publishers are focused more on pushing new stuff as opposed to worrying about releases, I guess. So maybe that's why they're not that bothered about June.
I think, well, actually, this kind of ties into maybe one of the conversations we're going to have later on. But sometimes it's just sort of almost an industry-wide trend of inconsistency, which I guess saying that out loud is the opposite of a trend. When, this year we're kind of sat looking at June and it maybe being a little bit slim and saying, well, there's all kinds of other things going on in June, as you alluded to, the stuff we're going to talk about later in the podcast and the Summer Game Fest action that's occurring in the coming week. But then you flash back to last June, which was a very similar story in terms of the amount of press and media and excitement and reveals and going on at this time of year. But we were talking about Diablo, and we were talking about Street Fighter, and we were talking about Final Fantasy, some of the biggest franchises on the planet, all welcoming in new entries. And look, it's just a timing thing, I get that, but it is kind of funny to me how 2 Junes 1 year apart can differ so greatly.
That is very true, because me saying that they're more worried about pushing new stuff. Obviously, that would have been exactly the same last year, so it doesn't really stand up. So what is going on with the industry, Jamie?
Well,
what is going on?
I wish if only there was a stream that had taken place in the last week that we could break down and analyze, new story by story, reveal by reveal, and offer our insight and our thoughts and opinions into potential, state of the industry matters.
It's funny you say that. Because today, that's exactly what we're going to do. But first, before we do that, I would like to hear what you have been playing, if anything, since the last time we had a little chat. Actually, no, before you do that, before you go hardcore on me there, I want to give a quick shout out to some lovely people that are joining us in chat. I would like to say hello to the Funky Penguin, Slick1977, Magni, and Rodrigo, who are joining us live on YouTube as we speak. Thank you so much, guys, for coming over and having a chat with us while we do this live. And with that, now, Jamie, I want to hear what you've been playing.
Well, I'll keep it brief because a funny thing happens, I think, when we actually go 2 weeks without recording an episode of the podcast, is you end up playing more, but that ends up kind of like almost watering down and distilling what you actually feel like you have to say about any individual game you did play. I would just note that I have played, I feel at this point, enough XDefiant to both talk about XDefiant and also say with some confidence, I'm probably going to not play that much more
I
XDefiant.
knew that was what you were about to say.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, they had a really strong first opening couple of days, opening week. I can't remember what it was. I remember at one point they announced that they'd hit around 8 million players, which again, you know, is it's a very strong number. But then again, you're talking about a free-to-play title from a major publisher that draws influences and you know and imagery from a lot of other major franchises, and also had a number of public and private alphas and betas and so on over what felt like a pretty long lead up time to the actual final release. I guess I'm not sure it's necessarily damning. I just think I don't have that much more to say to it beyond anything that I said about it after any of those alphas or betas. I think its fundamentals are fine. Sometimes hurt a little bit by what feels like connectivity issues. That might have just
Right.
been teething problems in the opening couple of days, but it did sometimes feel like there was a little bit of kind of like hit registration felt slightly off, and every now and then, you know, you getting killed when you feel like you're around the corner from someone is frustrating, and it's the kind of thing that we claim happens all the time because it makes us feel better about ourselves. But when you know you've just killed someone else from around the corner, that's when you begin to go, huh. I think something might be a little bit awry on the back end of this game, and I did feel that a couple of times, and it just lent to the whole experience not feeling quite as fluid or as crunchy as I wanted it to. I also think that game has some issues with progression, and they've probably tailored it, very and tuned it very finely because it's a free-to-play title, and they expect large numbers of players and maybe high levels of engagement. But if Call of Duty was sort of the archetype for the first-person shooter where every single thing you do, even if it's dying sometimes, you're seemingly rewarded for it. XDefiant strays away from that, and sometimes the lack of medals and the lack of kind of like challenges that you're progressing through, and the lack of or the rate at which you're unlocking weapons or unlocking attachments for those weapons sometimes feels a little bit slow. Battle pass progression felt incredibly slow. And when you combine that with the fact that in the games there's also not as much going on. For example, there's no kill streaks in the game, just as one thing
Right.
to kind of, and I'm not just picking on Call of Duty, or comparing it to Call of Duty for the sake of it. XDefiant is pretty unashamedly an attempt to kind of be a bit of a Call of Duty throwback, to play a little bit like what someone might describe as sort of a 360 or PS3 era Call of Duty game playing like. And so yeah, that's the bottom line. Is I think it does actually kind of achieve that in a way that I think anyone who has a FPS shaped hole in their life right now and doesn't have any money to fill it with might as well give XDefiant a go. But I'm not sure it's the game for me in the long term. But it's the kind of thing I will keep an eye on. And if there are big updates, revamps, additions, changes in the future, I've got no aversion to going and checking it out because, again, like something like Siege, for example, is massive, but that's impenetrable for me because the level is so high, and
Yeah.
it feels like it requires something of me that I just don't have to offer in my 30s. XDefiant isn't like that, and grounding itself in sort of the blueprint that Call of Duty laid down allows it to kind of have that degree of accessibility that it makes it feel like it's something I could come back to in the future, but that I've probably got my fill of for now. Be curious to see kind of what the engagement was like for that game as the months roll on, and how after hitting that pretty solid high of 8 or so million players very early on, how many of them it actually managed to hang on to. I'm looking forward to seeing what those numbers are like, and also what kind of presence it has at the Ubisoft Forward, which I believe is a week away at the time of recording. So, yeah, that's me. I'm also doing some Elden Ring, just in preparation for the DLC. I don't know if I'm going to jump into the DLC day one, but I'd like the idea of having a character that's ready to. So I've jumped back
Right.
in, and I have made some progress. I won't bore on about that because I am the least educated Elden Ring player, perhaps of all time. I just farm runes until I'm drastically overpowered and hope I can kill bosses before I have to dodge or learn any of their routines or anything like that.
You're a man after my own heart.
Hey, yeah, it's my cross to bear.
Yeah.
I'm not a FromSoft guy.
It's funny you say about XDefiant though, because I feel like the thing that makes something like Siege inaccessible is I do you think that maybe that is the thing that makes it so popular? The thing that makes it so successful is like the meta that forms around the game about how the game is played, that was maybe never necessarily what the developers intended, but it's almost like what an audience found and how they made that game playable. But that's also the sort of thing that means that a game like XDefiant very well may fail, because it doesn't have that. It doesn't have like an emergent meta thing around it, which is how people end up playing it, because it's more like an old school 5v5, and that may therefore be its downfall. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Kind of, but I don't know. I feel like for as long as a game has a consistent player base, those metas kind of develop anyway. And I think there is more of a symbiotic relationship that we sometimes let ourselves admit between the metas that develop around games and the way those games were kind of designed to be played. I'm sure there's always a little bit of, to an extent, a learning experience from the developer side, where they look at the feedback or they watch back matches or whatever they do to kind of get a gauge on how their game's going down and saying, oh, people are playing it in a way that we didn't expect. We thought it would be paced like this when it's paced like that, or we thought, these kinds of weapons would be used when those kinds of weapons would be used. And I think, players and developers both kind of learn from each other in that way. I suppose one thing that could very easily happen, for as much as I'm kind of comparing it to Siege in that way at the moment, is what is going to inevitably happen, because it happens to Call of Duty every year as well, is that time progresses, the player base and the player count drops, and the concentration or the saturation of high level and extremely committed players increases, and you end up with a game that doesn't feel quite as approachable or as accessible as it did at launch. So perhaps that's one asterisk that I need to kind of offer up with that assessment and comparison to something like Siege, is that there's never been a better time to be good at a free-to-play first-person shooter than its first week. I'm not suggesting I could have done the same if I'd been there for like the first week of a CS game or for Siege, but I'd have been better then than I would be now, and that's just the nature of the way these games develop and evolve. So it might not stay that way forever. I think all I was saying was that because it is so grounded in that sort of Call of Duty language, and the Call of Duty language is the one that seems to be, I mean, even just numbers-wise, the most universally spoken amongst fans of the first-person shooter genre, at least PvP first-person shooters, that it's the one that's most likely to feel accessible to the highest number of players. But how that changes over time and how the kind of the meta and the player base progresses with that remains to be seen. These things can have a life of their own. No one would have predicted Siege being what Siege is in the first 6 months to a year of that game's release. That game was not particularly popular out of the gate. That game had problems out of the gate, and it changed a lot to be what it is now. And I guess, yeah.
I think that's what I'm not. Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest that developers don't know what they're doing. They just put a game out.
No, sorry, neither do I, for the record.
But no, I think insofar as like you look at a game like Siege, that, like you said, after a bit of a slow start, has done incredibly well, and then you look at something like Quarantine, and be like, what? How did the people who made that make that? And then you think, and then part of me thinks, oh, that's because it's almost like a symbiotic thing. So it's not one or the other. It's the developers and the players, and then they sort of, like you said, they come together and they learn from one another. But sometimes developers go, oh, I think this is a great idea, and they put that out, and everyone goes, this is terrible. And then it just kind of falls flat. So I think you need that symbiosis, and I'm not sure. I've not played XDefiant, so I don't know if it's a game that will have that. But yeah, fingers crossed for Ubi that it will be. Possibly won't, based on your experience of it so far. But we'll never know. See.
The one thing that still remains true about XDefiant was one of the first things I think we ever said about it, which is that there are a massive number of people, probably at this point tens of millions of players, especially even just in the console scene alone, that are lapsed Call of Duty players, or that aren't that excited at the prospect of getting the 6th Black Ops game when that launches later this year, but might still have a little itch that needs scratching when it comes to that kind of fast-paced arcadey multiplayer. And if you offer them a free version of that, they may well take you up on it. I think that's why the numbers were so solid out of the gate, and it will be interesting to see if Call of Duty remains on the trajectory that it feels like, which is that it will remain very popular, but perhaps has already peaked in terms of its popularity. It will be interesting to see if anyone else manages to sneak through that doorway, whether it's XDefiant or another kind of rival. We'll see.
Very true. Very true. Okay, well, I've not been playing anything in particular. I'll say I've
Okay.
been dabbling with obviously I've not finished Senua Saga 2 yet. And I've played a
I
little bit
didn't.
more.
Yeah, you hadn't even started that the last we podcast.
Had I not?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
you hadn't.
did a child
Because I
just
think
wander past?
I was yeah, a child
I
just walked
think they
past. Don't
did.
worry about it.
No, yeah, maybe not actually, because yeah, I don't think we've not even spoken about it.
I think I played an hour during the last episode of the podcast because I think we streamed the night it came out.
Oh yes, we did. You're right. So okay, well, actually, well, blimey, let me quickly touch on that first. Then I think I've played about 3 hours so far, and I would say where I'm at the moment is it's phenomenal. I think
Wow. Okay, that was not the adjective that I don't know what adjective I was predicting, but that's a stronger one than I thought.
don't get me wrong, it's by no means perfect, but I
Right.
will say that the elements of the whispering, the psychosis kind of side of it,
Yeah.
and the fighting. I think they've because what I was really worried about was like the fact that the combat was going to feel weaker, and I think as some people have criticised the combat. I think they've managed to, so far in what I've played, they've managed to do something with, especially with the combat, which is something that most games don't seem to try to do. Which is and the problem is, it's a hard problem. You cannot code every single encounter in a video game to be unique. So what you end up doing is coding AIs and enemies to have certain rules, which is why they will end up feeling the same. And then the death sequences or whatever, you've only got a handful to pick from. So they after a while it starts to feel repetitive. But I think in this game what they've done is they have said, no, we're not just going to throw enemies at you to give you loads to fight. We're going to say each enemy is like a specific standalone character in a story. Even though like the people who aren't that relevant, they feel like they're there for a purpose. I've not felt like I've fought anyone who is just there to be cannon fodder, to be killed. It feels like they're there to fill out the story, and I've really enjoyed it.
Right.
The puzzling. The puzzling is the weirdest part to me because when it sort of suddenly says, "Oh no, there's a mysterious mental gate, and you've got to line up these things to progress to the next thing," it feels so tacked on to me, which is weird because it's like the game feels incredible, and then suddenly you get this puzzle where you've got to stand in a certain spot and look at a certain thing, and I'm like, why have you made the games? Why have you made such a good game that's so everything seems so relevant and everything seems so gritty, and the acting and the facial scanning, everything seems so spot on, and then you give
Yeah.
me this stupid visual puzzle.
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I don't really have a great answer for that. I'd imagine it's something to do with the fact that they still consider that one of the kind of the core pillars of their gameplay formula, and they had already kind of simplified or streamlined enough of the other pillars that maybe that they'd be worried that if it really was just you're walking until you're fighting and then you're fighting until you're walking, then people might get pissed off. That's as you and I both know. I just to throw it out there, I finished it. I think a couple of days after it came out, and
Nice.
I came out of it net positive as well, with some caveats. But of course, it would be very reductive, even if you threw the word puzzling in there and was like walking, fighting, puzzling, walking, fighting, puzzling. That's far more reductive, and that it. But I don't know. I just feel like to remove the puzzles entirely would have been a step too far. I think the more interesting move would have been to find ways to kind of not double down on them, but add a little bit more variety. Anyone who played the first game is pretty familiar with how Hellblade's puzzles function at this point, and there are certain sequences towards the end of the game where it's that classic thing in any kind of game with sort of some slightly more drawn out puzzles of when you know what you know what you need to do rather, but the time you're spending isn't getting your character to the places where they can do it. That can sometimes be a little bit of a drag. That was my thought on them.
Listen, yeah, let me clarify because there are those the visual puzzles where you need to get in a specific location to like progress that I found just trialing because I don't why am I being made to do this when I know that the thing blocking me is supposed to be in her head, like
Yes.
that because then I get that that's part of her psychosis and everything, but it's just a little odd. It's a bit strange in that sense. But you then have an early on, like there's a couple of puzzles whereby they are completely relevant to the gameplay. One where you find the hidden people. I'm thinking of.
Okay, in like a cave system.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
that to me was totally fine. That was, again, it was a kind of like a visual puzzle. There's simplistic puzzles, they're visual things, and they're a little not visual, sorry, but they incorporate, weirdness. I don't want to, like, ruin it for anyone who wants to play and hasn't. But that to me was totally fine. And there's also these hidden little extra things you can find, little tidbits of information. The faces,
Right, yes,
the giant stone faces. I have not loved anything in a game quite as much as I loved that the first time I encountered it.
Really? Oh well. The first time you encounter it, you're like, hang on, and you have that. Hang on a second, that looks like a face moment. It is cool.
And then you look at it, you focus on it, and then it disappears into the environment, and then it's not the face, it's the. And I was like, how have they even made that? Like, how have they programmed that and developed that, or how have the artists incorporate? That's so clever, and I thought it was fantastic. That's such a nice little touch. But it's just those stupid visual puzzles where you've got to be like, climb up, because I don't know if you had this, but I had a couple of times where I like climbed up into a place to just like have a look around, and was like, well, there's nothing here. Climbed up to another one, was like, oh, there's nothing here, and then I progressed, and then the gate came down, and then I was like, oh, well, obviously the reason I could climb up to that ledge was because that's where I've got to stand, which then made me feel a little less immersed in the experience, I'd say.
Yeah, there are weird examples. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're talking about, but where like you might be on the kind of the set path forward, and there's a detour, and you take that detour, and there's nothing on it, and then you get back on the main path, the critical path, progress a little bit more, and then your progress is blocked, and you realise that now's the point you're meant to go back and take that detour, but that meant that you were allowed to entirely explore that detour while there was nothing to do there. And while there, as Jonesy pointed out, there are technically two different kinds of collectibles in this game. They're not. They're interesting to look for, but they're not scattered through the environment in such a way where it always feels rewarding to go off on these sort of misadventures. And I think that's one of the interesting things that I kind of ended up thinking about Hellblade, which maybe it's a good thing we didn't have a podcast last week, because some of the Hellblade discourse was still rattling on, and I might have got myself in trouble, or some I don't know which set of fans were called from my head, but one of them. For as much discussion as there was around this game's length, and I even started seeing some bizarre tweets where people were taking screenshots of their dashboard on the Xbox, or they're pulling up the Windows game bar and saying, "Oh, it took me 14 hours to finish. Don't know what these weirdos are saying about 5 hours." Is like, no, I think it took me like 7.5 or something.
Right.
But it could have been shorter. And maybe even should have been shorter. One of my weird takeaways about Hellblade 2: Senua Saga is that game, for a 5 to 8 hour experience, depending on how slow you take things, still has pacing issues. And I actually think that there could have been a more condensed, more like sharp, like a sharpened, like 4 hour experience within that. That for me, again, like as someone who was just a Game Pass subscriber who played something because it popped up in my library, I would have been totally fine with that, maybe even enjoyed it more. There are elements and ideas that begin to contradict that. Obviously, you've played enough of the game, and anyone who watches the trailers will know that there is a far greater presence of NPCs, I guess you'd call them, or just additional characters. And while it never quite gets into pure like ensemble territory, there does get to they do get to a point towards the end where there are enough players, sort of orbiting around Senua as a character, that they begin to play as big a part of the story, and in some cases, going up to the finale, a bigger part of the story than Senua even does. There are actual moments, cutscenes towards the end of the game, where Senua is almost like just like a B part, like off to the side, watching something significant happen between other characters, and maybe that stuff wouldn't have been as strong if you spent less time with them. So swings and roundabouts. But yeah, I overall I liked it, and I also just agree with you on the combat. I think that a lot of people, myself included, talked about it being stripped back, and talked about it being simplified, because when you make a one-to-one comparison between Sacrifice and Saga, it is in a lot of ways like there are some mechanics and ideas that have been taken out, like the way that boss fights, for example, worked in that original game. There's no real attempt to kind of like re-implement that kind of the fundamentals of the fighting system in that sense. but they've all been reworked in service of this extremely cinematic and extremely dynamic kind of presentation. That, like you said, like the first time you experience it, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that there's a point early on where you're freeing someone from a Draugr kind of camp, and it's the first time you experience combat against multiple enemies at once, and the way that you're kind of like spun around and taking on enemies from different directions, and all of a sudden you're getting tackled from behind or someone's diving in front of you, and all these things that feel, of course they're scripted, but to you they feel extremely dynamic and spontaneous, and lend themselves to the cinematic presentation in a really quite striking way. I was very impressed by a lot of that. Some of them, the reason I was pulling some faces earlier, I did think some of them went on a little bit too long, and that you did start to see enemies repeat themselves and movesets repeat themselves. But that's a minor quibble in what was otherwise an enjoyable combat system.
Maybe I'm just not there yet. Like maybe I'm at the point where we started to, which so I was, because I would say the reason I say phenomenal, and this, like I said, is not to say it's not without its issues, but I've not played a game I think for a long time where it feels like I'm playing one long, like you said, super theatrical, almost like interactive cutscene, where it doesn't feel like I'm walking into an environment. Like I played a game today where you walked into an environment, you're like, oh, I'm going to come back through here later, and I'm going to need to go over there, I'm going to need to hide there, I'm going to need to do, and it's all laid bare in front of you. Whereas this feels, where I'm up to at the moment, feels like this incredible, like completely scripted, just intense. And I would say it really reminds me of Disco Elysium. Like, it's been a long time since I played the first Hellblade, and I haven't played it for a while. I didn't play it all the way through either. But yeah, the way, from my memory of that, is you get the whispering in your ears, and it's just like these words and these phrases, and it's unsettling. But this, I felt like I had specific characters whispering to me, and specific people, in the way that when I was playing Disco Elysium, where I had like my sense of like, the specific voices in Disco Elysium talking to you, and these specific characters who sounded a certain way and would kind of give you the same sort of thing, which I love. I think it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Interesting. A Game of the Year contender, perhaps. A top 10? A top 10er?
If it carries on as it is, definitely. We'll have to see. But like I said, I'm sort of 3.5 hours in, so yeah, I'll crack on. And the only other thing I'll mention, and I'll try to keep it brief. I showed you earlier, Jamie. I've got a new little friend.
Hey, there he is.
Who's come to play.
Help the audio listeners at home so they don't think you've just got your penis out on camera.
So I got a MetaQuest 3 at the weekend, which I've been having a play around with. I thought it was time to take the next step on the VR path. Obviously, I've got a HTC Vive, but it doesn't make an appearance very often. I used to play it quite a bit at the beginning when I first had it. Not so much, obviously, more recently. And then I wanted to give a MetaQuest a try. I wasn't going to get a Pro Apple Vision Pro.
Oh, no, that's excessive.
However, I would say, like, mixed reality on the MetaQuest 3 is something that needs to be experienced. Not just on the 3, but what it is and how it works is, I'm genuinely blown away by it.
Interesting. You're just reminding me of that video that Mark Zuckerberg did, like a few days after the Apple's headset came out, where he was like, you guys know that the MetaQuest can do this, and this, right?
So, yeah, and it can. And this is what's kind of crazy to me, because I've started getting really interested in VR again, and I was like, I really want to, but I'm kind of my Vive, like, I got it out recently because I was just playing on it again. I was like, it feels dated, and the lenses and stuff aren't phenomenal, and it does feel like you're in a gas mask the whole time. And I was like, I wonder where we're up to. Let me have a look at the modern stuff and see what people are saying. And I heard a lot of very positive stuff about the MetaQuest 3, and the fact that you don't, obviously it's not connected to a computer, it's completely standalone, or whilst it can also be connected. It's got Steam Link, for example, integrated into it. You can plug it into your PC as well, and you can play like that, or you can play on its own standalone. It's like 2 hours of battery. I've got the smaller one, so I've got 128 gig version, so it can take a few games. But yeah, when you've got it in mixed reality mode, the fuzziness of the cameras that are giving you the picture from your world isn't very noticeable. Like it's fuzzy. But when you then have virtual elements that you drop into your world, like you can leave a screen or you can leave a browser on next to the wall in one room, walk out to another room, make yourself a cup of tea, walk back into the room and have the screen still there playing a movie or the TV or whatever you like. And and the fidelity and how well it stays in place, and it looks phenomenal. The screen, the virtual screen looks clearer than the real world because the real world that's being passed through on the cameras isn't that good. It's a weird feeling because the virtual elements are better than the real elements.
Yeah, no, I can see that,
which is strange. But it's very, very, very good. And I've played around with a lot of lots of different apps. The virtual stuff is cool. The virtual games, like full virtual games, are fine. That look very, very good, much clearer than my old HTC does.
Yes, and you must find the kind of the liberation of being completely wireless also kind of maybe massive. I don't know if it unlocks another part when you're gaming, but just the kind of not having that thing in the back of your mind of, hey, don't get tangled up and don't trip and don't yank anything out. And
that is a really big part for sure. And it's also the fact of how easy it is that you can literally pick it up, hold the button down, and it's on. Which with my Vive, it's like you've got to get the cables out, plug the lighthouses in, then you've got to connect everything up, get an extension lead, and like you said, you're then tethered, and you've got a certain distance you can move away. Whereas this, you can just be. It sounds terrible, like people would laugh about squat and surf when you're like on the toilet and you're doing whatever. Earlier, I was like squat and VRing. Like I was sat there and I had the pass through on, and I had like a web browser up, and then that was over here, and then I had like the library up, and I was scanning through that, and then I was like, and this is the other thing.
I have so many logistical questions, but I don't want to ask them
because it's got hand tracking as well. You can not use the controllers; you can use your hands, and it can see your fingers and your hands and everything, and you can like do stuff and move around and whatever, and it's weird. It's very, very good. It's not perfect.
Like watching it track your hand as you go and take some toilet paper and things like that.
Well, I wasn't looking at that because then I was getting freaked out that like, do they record everything? So then there's some dude.
Mark
on the
Zuckerberg
toilet.
was seeing you shit live in real time.
Maybe he was, but no, yeah. I think it's for the first time. I think I've kind of thought, oh wow, we're not that far away from, the proper mixed reality of the future, where it will be seamlessly integrated. And everything will look phenomenal, and you'll never take the glasses off because it'll all be amazing.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I feel like I'd like to think I would take the glasses off at times.
Well, so one strange thing I would say is like if I put a TV the size of my TV next to my TV in virtual space, and then I sit down on my sofa, the virtual TV looks as good as my TV does.
Right? Yeah. I get that part entirely, but I think what I'm saying is that for as long as the elements around that it is still being fed to me via a pass-through, no matter how good that pass-through gets, I still think there's a part of me that hopes that I take off those glasses or goggles or whatever they are from time to time, just to see the real world and keep myself grounded.
Would you actually want to see your friends for real when you're used to seeing them with a live filter on? Would you really want to see what those guys look like? Or would you like to just keep seeing them as they
I don't know why this is the first place my face went. My brain went. But I was imagining like hookers and prostitutes and escorts where you have to wear a mixed reality headset that applies like live filters to their faces and their bodies to make them look better.
That before. Do you remember?
Did we? Okay, that's probably why it was the first thing my head went to.
Because I think we were talking about how in the future it'll be like VR, and then you'll take your VR headset, but then there'll be hookers who will do what the VR does, but she'll look like whatever. You won't care what she looks like because you're seeing the VR. But I think you're right. I think the more likely thing is it's mixed reality, and she's got a filter on, so you can have whoever you want. You can have live tracking onto her.
Deep fake someone else's face over,
exactly.
A slightly more acceptable, perhaps, example. I was at a wedding over the weekend, and if you had a pair of sunglasses that would like pick up someone's faces, draw a little box around it, and then go, "Oh yeah, that's so and so, your great aunt," and then you don't have to remember anyone's name. That could be quite useful.
Well, see, I think the Vision Pro does that. Obviously, the MetaQuest is not doing that sort of stuff yet. It's gaming and it's mixed reality.
Right,
you can
and
work on it.
I think more importantly, you wouldn't go to a wedding wearing a MetaQuest.
You look a bit odd.
I'm talking about when the Ray-Ban and Meta kind of crossover
Yeah.
gets to the point where I'm just wearing a pair of Sunny G's.
Yeah, that's the hope. But no, I'm massively impressed with it. So much so that I've bought a Pro strap and a extra battery. To
Those sound like accessories for something completely different, but
they are for the MetaQuest 3, I promise you.
Okay, Jonesy, what you do with your strap and the extra batteries you bought for it, in the comfort of your own home, that's for you to enjoy.
But I think one thing I'm going to immediately say is, but then the one thing I can't list off to you is amazing VR games that I've played, because I haven't. Right. I've played a couple, but I think whenever I jump into an actual VR game, I'm kind of like, yeah, that was fun for 5 minutes, but it's actually not the be all and end all. Like I've had more fun designing and making 3D worlds and like video game level generation that you can do inside of it, where you can create elements and create worlds, and you can shrink yourself and grow yourself and move stuff around and create amazing 3D models super easy, and interactive elements that you can then program and people can interact with. But I'm still looking for that. That game that makes you sort of say, "Oh, this is it. This is the one." But I'm not there yet.
Killer app.
The killer app.
Yeah.
Killer app. We need the killer app.
I think that whole industry is looking for it. I saw some tweets in the last sort of 48 hours or so from Matt Piscatella, analyst formerly of the artist formerly known as the MPD Group. I forget what that new name is. But he was offering his perspective on the announcement of an adapter that allows the PlayStation VR 2 headset to work or communicate with PCs. That was just announced again in the last couple of days. And he was saying, like, hey, anyone who thinks that this moves the needle because PSVR 2 owners can now go and play Half-Life Alyx, you're wrong. Like, this is not a needle. This means a lot to some people, but this is not a needle mover.
I think for me, I've come down a little bit in the sense of actually maybe it's not a killer app and maybe it's a killer platform. So like I said, for me, the Quest 3 is obviously the one I've had the access to with the mixed reality, but it's not been one game. It's been everything you can do on it. It's the fact that you can watch TV, browse the internet, play a game, jump into mixed reality, do some work. Like I can have a virtual office. I can pop it on. It links to my Mac, and then it gives me my work screens in front of me, and I can have like 3 or 4 screens up, and I can sit using my keyboard and have pass through on, so I can see my Mac as well on a desk, and sort of as though I'm in a massive panoramic office. And I think it's that it's the environment, it's the whole environment thing. It's not one killer app at the moment. It seems to be all those different things you put together is, I'm just wearing it. Like I'm going to end up just wearing it 9 hours a day, taking it off when I go to bed, and then not this, but the future of whatever it is, the MetaQuest 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever the hell it is. But yeah, maybe it isn't an app. Maybe it's not the killer app. Maybe it's not Half-Life Alyx 5. Maybe it's just like a way of living. But hey,
we'll see. I mean, we've arrived at the point now where arguably well, I don't want to discount Valve and anything Gabe has up his sleeve, for example, but you can make the argument that the two of the most important companies for the future of VR or MR are Apple and Meta or / Facebook, which when you're talking about those two companies, you're not just acknowledging their size, but you're also talking about the fact that like gaming is one very small portion of what they see the future of these headsets being. So maybe the idea of like moving away from a killer game or a killer app is actually perfectly reasonable. That's probably not the way that they see it,
No, but it's also the problem at the moment is the uptake. Like I spent some time in like VR chats and things, the most prominent ones that were on MetaQuest, and there's just nobody there.
Right.
Like there was that's not true. There was a few people there, but it's not like it's not like Ready Player One. Where everyone is in there all the time, and you're just. And also, I was then googling around about like how is the metaverse going at the moment? Like, has that started yet? Because I know obviously this is a massive thing that Meta are talking about, and the idea that you can jump around and you can exist in the metaverse and you can visit websites and you can buy this and you can buy that. It just doesn't exist. They can talk about it. And actually, I was looking at it again today because I know there's I can't remember the name of it. There's the big one where they like sell land in it, and it's like, and you trade in Ethereum and all this. You can barely use it in VR. Like it's a PC desktop application at the moment, or website. And it's like, well, that's not the metaverse, then, is it?
No, that's just Second Life at that point.
That is just Second Life, exactly. It's just so happens that people are selling you crap stuff that you buy with Ethereum in Second Life too.
Yeah.
But we need that. We need that thing. We need that metaverse. We need that interconnectivity. But anyway.
You know what, Jonesy? Bold
digress.
statement. You're going to be the man to create it. Watch the space, folks. You're staring at the next tech billionaire.
Thank you. I won't forget you guys when we're there.
Can you sign up to the Patreon when you hit the jackpot, please?
Yeah, I can indeed.
Thank you.
Anyway, let's move on to. I was going to say something more exciting than me blabbering on about VR, but it's maybe not so exciting because we have had PlayStation's State of Play, and unfortunately, it was a little bit underwhelming. That's the word, I think. In some respects, some people were whelmed. I was underwhelmed. I know that you were underwhelmed. I know Chris was underwhelmed. But yeah, so we didn't know that this State of Play was going to happen. It was a little bit of a surprise one. We had just 24 hours notice ahead of it, and we did get to see some cool stuff. So we're going to go through it and we're going to talk about it. As we said, there's nothing really that nothing that blew me away completely. But hey, let's run through it. Let's take it point by point and talk about what we actually got to see. We got to see some new Concord gameplay. Concord is the 5v5 multiplayer that we'd heard talk of before. So this is coming in from Firewalk Studios. It's going to be coming on August 23rd. And I think this for me, did you get weird Beyond Good and Evil 2 vibes from the trailer for this? Because I definitely got that for the story part.
I could definitely see the Beyond Good and Evil 2 comparisons in that you're seeing kind of like humanoid characters wisecracking at each other in this kind of ambiguously sci-fi. Yeah, exactly. I saw a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy chatter as well. I think both of those make sense as a frame of reference. Yeah.
But yeah, it looked very cool. Like I really enjoyed the story part of the trailer. I think they did a great job of setting it up, and with those characters, is the idea that they are a sort of like a mercenary or a group of not bandits. What's the word I'm looking for? Like just like ne'er-do-wells doing
nomads.
Nomad, do some naughty stuff. Yeah, and then they in the story trailer they stole something that then some people tried to steal from them, and then by the end of that we got into this whole sort of like it's 5v5, and you are gonna your team are gonna take on another team. It was very sort of Overwatch. It was very of that ilk, wasn't it? Of course.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts? What did you think?
I'll be honest. I was a little bit underwhelmed by the whole thing. I didn't enjoy that cinematic trailer as much as you did, perhaps by the sounds of things. I thought it was. Yeah. I just thought that, and this isn't Concord's fault, and so I always feel a little bit guilty when I blame Concord or Firewalk for something like this. But when you go into a State of Play knowing you were going to see whatever it was, 14 games, I think they'd announced ahead of time, they given the specific number, and you also know roughly how long the State of Play is going to go on for, and you realise you're sat there watching a 4-minute long cinematic trailer for a world that you absolutely know nothing about, for characters that are kind of doing some MCU level wisecracking that you're not really feeling, and that all of this is going to feed into what you already knew was like a PvP FPS that you're probably not going to play. You kind of sat there going like, okay, let's get a move on, guys. I get it. A range of swashbuckling characters that some of them get on with each other, some of them less so, but they all have something quirky to say about it. And I'm being extremely reductive and unfair. It must be incredibly hard to introduce an entire universe. You know what it struck me as? It struck me as one of those universes that, if you went to Firewalk Studios, there's probably someone on the writing on the narrative team in the back who could talk to you for like 3 hours straight about the world of Concord and these characters and who they are and how they came to be there. And then Sony were like, we need a 4-minute long cinematic trailer that introduces 8 different characters and this world and sets up the rough premise for some of the action that follows. And also it needs to be funny. And they're like, well, that's and also we're giving it to an external company to make, so send them a brief. And you're like, that's not how this works. That sounds horrible. But the end result was something that didn't really click for me. Um, the gameplay trailer, I guess it fared slightly better in that I felt like I was seeing a video game, which helped
Yeah.
slightly. I just felt a bit bad for them because it just felt like it was lacking a bit of bite. It felt like it was lacking a bit of vavavoom. I don't really know how to put it.
Je ne sais
Yeah,
quoi.
yeah, there is a je ne sais quoi, but it's a je ne sais quoi of the edge variety. It lacks a little, a little kind of
It did look kind of clean and
chutzpah.
safe, and Overwatch meets Apex Legends, and just kind of like, you've seen this before, you know what this is. It was a little bit like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure that they will put their own twists on it. Like for example, yes, they did have their big jolly robot character that all of these a lot of these games kind of have, but his move set looks slightly different to some other characters that have kind of that ilk. They didn't make him a Bastion where he's kind of like a roaming fixed gun emplacement. He has like all these sort of suction based abilities and weird things like that. But and the gunplay itself looked solid. It didn't really look. It looked a little bit more FPS centric than something like Overwatch perhaps does. I think there are some Destiny kind of veterans on that development team at Firewalk, and you could see a little bit of that. Especially, there's one character who was quite prominent throughout both the cinematic and the gameplay trailer. This like green dude who looked a bit like Michael Rooker, who clearly uses something that looks akin to a hand cannon from the Destiny games. And
Right.
when I was seeing that being used, I was like, okay, that looks familiar, and I bet that feels punchy and impactful. But I just don't really want to play a character-based 5v5 multiplayer shooter at the moment. Like, we put it this way: later on in the breakdown of the state of play, we're going to talk about another like character-based, well, from limitedly third-person shooter that is going to be that will be also vying for our time, that exists in a world and a universe and is populated with characters that I'm infinitely more familiar with, and like I just feel like Concord has its work cut out for it, especially as a game that may well debut at $60-$70 for all we know. I don't know how you're going to get people to pay full price for that. And I think it's a strange look representative of the fact that this was one of the games that came out of a pivot for Sony and for PlayStation Studios, And we haven't seen the full extent of that pivot yet, but they did acknowledge that they were going to try and add some more multiplayer-centric live service titles to their portfolio. This was one of them, and I don't think they've got themselves off to the most inspired of starts.
It's funny because I actually think like if Sony had quite a few more irons in the fire, and there was more stuff that we were looking forward to, and there was already things to get our teeth into, I think Concord could have been a really nice addition, and it would have been something you could have looked at and said, oh yeah, cool, I like that Sony are doing that. But I'm with you in the sense of when Concord is one of the most prominent games in the state of play, and it shouldn't be. Because of what it is, I think I'm with you in that it is a little bit more of a worrying prospect. I don't really agree on the cinematic stuff. I thought the cinematics was very cool. I like the look of the game. I thought it looked. I like the look of it, but I'm with you in the sense of when that comes out and whatever the price tag is, I think it's a difficult ask to sort of say, hey, come on, pony up the cash for the. I'm worried about how that game fares, especially when you look at games like Overwatch going to free to play, and obviously saying like, well, hey, this model doesn't work for us, we're getting people to pay for it. And then Sony are like, we think we can make it work. So
you're absolutely right. Like as you just kind of alluded to, even Overwatch isn't Overwatch anymore. And I know they have very different track records when it comes to the quality of their output and the kind of the fan sort of excitement and anticipation around their output. But I think you look at another major publisher like Ubisoft, and they are like the quintessential example or the quintessential reminder that striking gold with a live service title is an absolute like crapshoot, and that you're just going to keep releasing stuff and like we've already talked about in this very podcast things that were a hit like Siege, things that weren't like Extraction, things that we're waiting to see, like XDefiant. But in the middle of all of that, in and amongst their their single player output, there are the Riders Republics of the world, and there's the Trackmanias, and there's uh, the Roller Champions and Skull and Bones, and there's all the things that got cancelled. There's that Division game that just got cancelled. There was that Ghost Recon game that got cancelled. Like, Ubisoft are a walking, talking advertisement right now for the fact that sometimes getting a hit when it comes to a live service title is a bit like shooting fish in a barrel, and I just slightly worry for Sony that they've kind of pivoted in this direction, and at the moment, they're coming out and talking about one of them, and it's something that feels so familiar and doesn't do anything that's immediately obvious, at least, to differentiate itself in what is an extremely saturated market where completely free video games die on a seemingly monthly basis.
Yeah.
Hyperscape, like another Ubisoft joint that just died and was free. It's going to be a really.
Was Hyperscape the one where we kept saying, "Is it dead yet?" Was that? Or was that the other one?
Very possibly.
Could have been the other one. I don't know. Can't remember the name of the other one.
Hyperscape lasted for less than 2 years. I just looked it up. That's all. I'm just slightly worried. Slightly worried about Concord, and I hope for the best. And if I have the opportunity, for example, jump into that beta in July, I'll give it a fair crack because it could be great. But I have my concerns.
I want to say as well, I might be misremembering, but it wasn't at Concord that they kept sort of saying as well about how they're really going to support it. They're really going to support it. They're going to constantly be having new updates and new like vignette things. And didn't they say every month there was going to be a new cinematic or a new?
They did say that.
Which is like, do you think that is attempting to get ahead of people who would be saying things like this game's dead in a year? So they're trying to be like, no, we are saying now we have a plan. This is a supported game, so that's almost to try and stop some of that conversation. Do you think?
I think there's a bit of that, and I think it's also just like some of it is probably not even to try and get ahead of any of the negative chatter. It's just to try and create a more positive outlook for the game. It's just to kind of say like, hey, yeah, this is a live service game, and you will be continued to be rewarded in some way, shape, or form for sticking with it, and it will change and evolve. And kind of like what I said with XDefiant, it also creates this image in people's head of something that you might not need to gel with or mesh with immediately right off the bat to have a good relationship with later down the line, depending on how much of the fundamentals of the game can change. That being said, the only example of it they did give was, as you said, this cinematic vignette that you'd be greeted with every month. I think was it you said, which is like, that's great. But there are other games that do that. Call of Duty gives me a new cinematic to watch every time I launch the game after a new season, and I skip it, and I like the Call of Duty story.
Right.
You're also telling me this, and again, you and me slightly different in opinions on this, but you're also telling me this mid-minutes after a cinematic trailer I didn't enjoy.
Right.
These vignettes are not something I am looking forward to. I want to play a very good video game. So there are other live service hooks that would have meant more to me than that had they been revealed at this stage, but they kind of remain to be seen.
The only other thing, well, not the only thing, but one other thing that jumped out at me, and maybe this is just me, but we after that cinematic, and we had these sort of like 5 characters, and they really lent into like the different people in that, and it was it Star Child was one of them, and the green guy you said was one of them, like the sassy girl,
and that big robot guy, the big friendly robot.
Yeah, and then when we got to the end of the cinematic, got to the gameplay, it was like, oh, and there's like 16 playable characters.
Yeah, you see the character selection at one point, and you're like, oh, this is a full roster. They've just clearly picked 6 of them to make the kind of the poster child at this point.
So which is then kind of weird, because you're like, well, hold on, now if I'm not playing as those 5 characters, am I really playing the proper game? But then you're like, oh no, it's because what it is you've tried to pull a narrative out of a 16 or however many people in a 5v5 PvP game. You've tried to sort of create a narrative out of it that doesn't really exist. This is just a sort of arena shooter. But Yeah, which is then makes it kind of weird because now I'm like, I was excited about that little, like you said, you weren't that into it, but I was excited about those characters. I was excited about the world they were building, and then it was almost like, oh, well, don't worry about any of that because it's actually irrelevant.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how they juggle it. You know, that would. Yeah, it's just impossible to know. I feel like everything I say about a game like Concord could so easily be proved wrong within a matter of months from the time of this conversation. I
Yes.
just, yeah, I'm just slightly worried about it. That's all. Yeah.
Fair. Next up, we had God of War Ragnarok, the announcement that it was coming to the PC on September the 19th, and it will feature the Valhalla DLC, but it also have some PC enhancements such as ultra-wide support and unlocked frame rates. This reminded me that I didn't play the Valhalla DLC yet because my disk drive was broken, but now my disk drive works. I can play the Valhalla
Oh.
DLC.
I'd forgotten you'd gone through that whole situation around the time I've got to. Yeah, you should go back and play that DLC. That is very good content for a very good game.
Yeah, no, looking forward to it. Now that I've remembered it's a thing, I'll definitely have to do it. Then we had the Dynasty Warrior Origins, developed by Megaforce, that will be released on PS5 later next year, offering a new depiction of the Three Kingdoms. With massive battlefields. I used to love playing Dynasty Warriors back in the day. I've not played it for a very long time, but I'm not going to
Yeah.
say I wouldn't be tempted. I'm not going to say I wouldn't be tempted with a new Dynasty Warriors
No,
game.
I'm in the same boat. When I first heard some murmurings that a Dynasty Warriors could appear on this stream, I was like, oh yeah, okay, great. Like another game that doesn't do anything for me. And whilst I know that there haven't been a huge amount of Dynasty Warriors games recently, that kind of whether it's a Megaforce's work specifically or just the kind of that large scale hack and slash genre has been has had some good games and some bad games that have hit in recent years, and almost none of them have been for me in one way or another. But I was sitting there watching this trailer and going, actually, like if their view on this was let's return to the Dynasty Warriors franchise because now with the PS5 we have a console that's powerful enough to put like ludicrous numbers of enemies on screen and you can just kind of charge through them and mow through them. I was watching some of that action and it was giving me flashbacks to what it sounds like you have as well, that kind of nostalgia for the PS2 kind of Dynasty Warriors
Yes.
2, 3 kind of era where yeah, like everyone had their Dynasty Warriors moment, and it would be cool if they could harken back to that. Because I'm not super well read in it, but my understanding is that Dynasty Warriors as a series hasn't been good for a little while. I certainly know that 9, which I think was the last mainline one, like was not particularly well liked, at least by critics. I'm sure there are plenty of fans out there, as is always the case with something like that. But we're talking about a decade plus since there was, a quote unquote good Dynasty Warriors game, and even that comes with the asterisks of it being a good Dynasty Warriors game. So yeah, I hope this lands.
And
We'll see.
Origins is going to feature the largest battles ever. So that's going to be something because they've always been very big battles. So now they're going to be even bigger.
There you go. I hope it's good. Like I said, like there's a part of me that's slightly worried because while it's been so long since I played a Dynasty Warriors game, I have played some of the other things that a Megaforce have done with other franchises. Like I did play some Hyrule Warriors, and like some of the Dragon Quest stuff they did, and I just haven't really clicked with any of it.
Right.
So there's a part of me that's just worried that my days of wielding an unnecessarily long spear and sweeping the legs of 72 Chinese men at once are behind me. But even as I say that, it sounds fun. Also, I just want names like Lu Bu to just be things that we say out loud again.
Yeah. Why not? Um,
Yeah.
We then got to next up. We got to see some Infinity Nikki, which is an open world RPG from Kentaro Tominaga. That will have a beta test in Q3 of this year. If you did want to play an open world dress up adventure game on the PlayStation 5, then Infinity Nikki is sounds like it's going to be the one for you. Not gonna lie, this is one of the ones that I skipped. Where I was like, nope.
Yeah, it was one of those ones that I watched and go, "Hey, this isn't for me." And it was different. When the trailer started, I thought maybe we're getting like another sort of Breath of the Wild, Genshin sort of clone or something like that. But to go the kind of dress up and Pokemon Snap angle it's something, I guess, a little bit out there that is going to appeal to an audience. I just don't know if I'm in that audience.
But some people will be, so all good.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we had Where Winds Meet, which is an epic open world action adventure RPG set in ancient China, which is bringing martial arts and mysteries to the PS5. This had a cool trailer, to be fair. But yeah, not really sure what was going on. But looked cool.
Yeah, I've got to be careful with how but like it does feel like there is this sort of this growing sort of subgenre, or of games that are like they're action games or character action games that either look like they're sort of inspired by From Software titles or inspired going back to maybe like more traditional character action titles like Devil May Cry or Ninja Gaiden or something like that, or maybe like a balance between the two, like a kind of a God of War kind of thing. They all look like they were developed probably in either Japan or South Korea or China, and like they all pop up during these streams, and they also all feel like they never come out. Like,
Yes.
when you have like Where Winds Meet, and then you had another one on the stream that we haven't talked about yet, but Ballad of Antara was kind of one of those, and then you throw that in with like what's the kind of the Odyssey to the West game that's been around for ages, where you play as the monkey.
Did you mean enslaved?
No,
No. Sorry, you mean Battle Wukong, Black Myth Wukong.
Yeah, Black Myth. You have Black Myth Wukong, and then you have like there was that one that was at the PlayStation Showcase last year that was called like Phantom Blade Zero or something like that. And then there are a few others. Do you know what it reminds me of? And this is harsh, and it's a completely different genre. This is obviously an MMORPG, but it reminds me of how every year I would watch like an Xbox showcase, and there would be a really flashy trailer that looked really, really impressive and had a really stylish combat. And I'd get to the end and I'd go, oh, it's Black Desert Online. It's an MMORPG that's
Right.
apparently been out for years, but I've never heard anyone ever talk about or play.
Yeah.
Although technically I have played it myself. And it's just like oh, weird, I guess that. And then at one point I think even the Black Desert Online devs started making a new game, which was again itself one of those. I just never know what to think. But even Stellar Blade or Project Eve, when it was announced, was one of those until it came out, and then it became a real thing. But that's just a part of me that like my eyes glaze over. Crimson Desert was the name of the other game developed by Pearl Abyss. That again, like it will probably show up at a Jeff Keighley show. It will probably look stunningly beautiful, and then I just don't know if it will ever come out. It's like, oh, that was an outrageously gorgeous game with some Soulsborne inspired combat. Bit that's probably developed in either South Korea or China. Maybe it will come out one day. I don't know.
And then years from now, someone will talk about the fact they played it, and you're like, "Oh, I never knew that even came out. Did it even come out?"
I didn't know Where Winds Meet came out. Sounds great.
Well, we've got a similar story, I reckon, now in Ballad of Antara, which is another new IP. This is a free-to-play action RPG by Tipsworks Studios, which is from Infold Games.
China, another Chinese studio for anyone.
Yes. So this is going to have you playing across seemingly very beautiful landscapes, and yeah, kind of like very bizarre, interesting intertwining of two worlds. As you're going to be traveling between them as different playable characters. Again, maybe a little bit of the same as we were talking about.
Kind of like, again, they're both sort of like very ambitious looking Chinese developed, action RPGs with very striking art styles and art directions that you wonder if you're ever going to play. I guess the thing that's maybe slightly different about Ballad of Antara is it's free to play, which it increases the likelihood of someone like you or I perhaps playing it, depending on kind of what happens in the build up to release. But yeah, I just find it increasingly hard to get a gauge on those kind of things, and I feel a bit guilty for kind of painting with too broad a brush when it comes to my descriptions or my way of kind of compartmentalizing those kind of games. But there are so many of them. It feels like And like
I
Summer
agree with
Game,
you. I just
like
just for, yeah.
Summer Game Fest is this week. It's 2 hours long, and there will come a point where we're going to watch a very stylish and flashy trailer with extremely high production values for a Chinese developed action game or action RPG that will just kind of get added to the list of games. Like, at this point, like it can be quite hard to distinguish one from another, unless of course they look outrageously different, like DokeV did. But even if you take out the fact that DokeV looked outrageously different, it's still another one of those games. It's an extremely flashy, high quality, high production value Eastern developed title that you don't know is real.
Yeah,
and you don't know if you're ever going to see again.
That's very true. It's very, very true.
By the way, DokeV, for what it's worth, developed by Pearl Abyss, the developers of Black Desert Online and Crimson Desert.
We should. Okay,
so I'm not going crazy. That I feel like there's something going on, and maybe there are some games that I'm putting in this bracket that don't belong it. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying. Yeah, I don't.
We should just TR. We should have a big like stamp TR comes on screen every time we watch something. We're like, this is never coming out. This is a tax.
You know what? Well, it will be the next week. Might be interesting, especially at Keeley's show on Friday, whatever it was. There may well be some TR action. Would it be TW?
Oh, of course it would. Oh God, look at that. Tax write-off, not write-off. Tax write-off. Next, we had a first look at a VR game, PlayStation VR game in this little showcase. It was Skydance's Behemoth, which is coming in fall of this year. It's a first-person, obviously, action-adventure VR game, which is going to combine brutal physics-based hand-to-hand combat with player traversal and environmental puzzle solving. But I think the biggest thing in this game, and this is probably why it's called Skydance's Behemoth, is you're also going to get massive behemoth boss battles in VR. And as you may not be surprised, I'm all for any new VR titles coming out that maybe can give me that I can get my hands on at some point later on. So there we go.
Lord knows it needs them.
See, I'm now of that thing. Like I said, I think there's loads of VR games out there, but I think the idea of like the killer one is not going to be a thing. But I do think we need to do more of like, good games that showcase VR well. More of those. Especially that do interesting things with traversal. It's one thing that still kills me in VR games is traversal is often not the best.
Right. Well, it's a tough nut to crack. I saw Marcus Brownlee using that weird mat that lets you walk in any direction the other day. So
that mat looks. That does look pretty cool. I don't know. Those things I'm always like, well, what's like the price point going to be, and how good are they at connecting with existing hardware? Like, you imagine that you would need like a company like Meta to go and buy the company that makes that and make it, integratable before it actually works.
I think the one that Marquez went to go and see and test was actually something that Disney were like creating themselves, their own like weird tech department thing. Again, I don't know where they plan on using it. Maybe it's some weird Disneyland thing, but yeah.
Because I saw a clip of him on it. I saw a clip of him using it, and I was like, "Oh, that is weird." Because it looks like the it sounds like the thing that in the book of Ready Player One, like he says about an omnidirectional treadmill that means you can run in any direction without falling on your ass. Which I'm like, it looks like what Marcus Brownlee was on, but I don't know enough about it. But I'll have to go look that up after we've had a little chat here, because if it's from Disney, maybe it's a little bit
is
more...
the name of the video is "I Tried a Disney Secret Project."
Secret,
and I think it's Walt Disney Imagineering. I think is the kind of the department that it kind of falls under.
Okay.
So I don't know what they're looking into that technology for. Maybe it's just general curiosity, if nothing else. But we'll see.
Well, Disney secrets, Jamie. Let's take a pause here and talk about something which isn't so secret, and that is the fact that this is a Patreon-supported podcast. There are some absolutely amazing people that have gone over to patreon.com/SuperShow, and for as little as $2 a month, they support us month in, month out, week in, week out, as we pop our little heads. Well, I say week in, week out. Obviously, weren't here last week, but let's forget about that. Most weeks. But yeah, they do keep the lights on. They keep us coming back. They keep this little train on the tracks. So I would like to give a shout out to them, because they are fantastic people. And I've got some names on screen right now of those people that have supported us. I would also like to give a shout out to Aaron Cameron, Athletic Gravy, Brimstone, Ice Knock Rock Salt, Jesper Kamdan Nielsen, Pastors Guild, Xander GTI, and the big dogs, the members of the board. I'm talking Brett Z, aka Shellshock, Geometric Potter, Hacksaw Bookread, Manuel Guerrero, and Peaswad. Are phenomenal supporters who've, a lot of you have been supporting us for a really long time, and it is fantastic. So thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
But let's jump back in because I want to talk Alien Rogue Incursion, which was the next game that we saw at the PlayStation showcase. Developed by Servios, it's a single-player VR horror game which is set to release holiday season for the PSVR 2, featuring a new Alien storyline. VR Aliens sounds horrendous to me because I'm just thinking facehuggers immediately.
Exactly. Oh, actually, I didn't even consider the facehugger implications, but you're right, they are severe. I was just thinking about Alien Isolation and how scary that could be, and applying that to virtual reality, and it sounded like something that I do not wish to sign myself up for. But if someone I knew wished to sign themselves up for, I could watch from a safe distance, then I would happily go along for the ride. And also just how cool, like, slash scary, being able to get hands-on with some of those, Alien sort of some of the iconography from the Alien series would be like the classic example, of course, being the kind of the pinging radar. Like you can imagine like holding that while your hand is shaking, sort of slowly walking forward.
And the noise as it goes starts to ping like faster.
Oh, all of that.
Horrible, mate. Absolutely horrible.
They have the opportunity there to make an incredibly intense, incredibly scary title, and I hope it lives up to all the promise that IP has.
Yes. That could be very good, but like you said, very scary. We then got to see some Marvel Rivals, which is, of course, a PvP shooter featuring Marvel superheroes, which is going to have a closed beta in July and will be coming to PS5, PlayStation, PC, and Mac. Okay, you can correct me on this. This is the first time I've seen anything from Marvel's Rivals and thought, wow, this doesn't look that good.
Interesting. I think it's a game that doesn't trailer well somehow. I feel like it's a game where the more you cut up that action and the more you transition from one character to another and one kind of moveset to another, the more disjointed the action begins to look. I don't know if that's actually what's going on, but the weird thing is I agree with you. There's something about Marvel Rivals that doesn't always look great in motion, but it has quite solid word of mouth, I feel like. At least that was the vibe I got when it, had that first kind of like sort of, I think it was invite only beta or whatever it was, maybe a month or two ago. But I'm still very interested in this. And again, I'm not trying to kind of create too kind of weird disparity between how I was giving Concord a hard time and how I'm giving Marvel Rivals a better time or an easier time. But I just think that, again, there's so much competition in that space, and Marvel Rivals doesn't have to introduce me to a new universe. It doesn't have to win me over with any of its characters. It's something I'm already incredibly familiar with. There's a visual language there that I can immediately understand, which, again, some people might interpret that as me saying, I want more things based off existing IPs rather than completely new stuff. And I don't want that to be the case. I'd love a world where, Firewalk could go out there with Concord and create their own universe from scratch. And yes, even if there are character archetypes in there, they get to introduce us to something that was completely new and completely original. Lord knows the games industry needs more of that. It's just a tougher sell. And also, when we're talking about a world where one of these games is probably going to be free and the other one is probably going to cost money, and we end up having to make decisions that are more about our time than our wallet, then I just thought the fact that these two, that this game and Concord were both in the same stream, kind of made me think about my kind of current relationship with ongoing PvP shooters and the room I have for a new one and things like that. It's weird. It's a tough time.
No, I think you make a really good point. I think your point about Concord was apt. Was that you're going to take a roster of characters that everyone knows, and that does so much of the work for you before you even have to play the game with Marvel Rivals.
Yeah.
I think the problem, I don't know what it was, but in this trailer, the way that they showcased the play, and I think you're right in that the way they jumped around was maybe a little bit too much for the sort of game it was. And every character seems to be so different because they're really pushing this idea of like, you are the superheroes, you're using their powers, it's really individual. It's an asymmetric shooter in that sense. But then the way that they were constantly sort of talking about the teaming up, and I can't remember what they called it, but I think they just call it team up abilities, I think is what they call it.
And dynamic hero synergy and things like that is a term that I've got written down in front of me.
I don't know. It just kind of looked a bit. I don't know. Kind of rubbed me up the wrong way a little bit. And when you actually look at some of the way that those heroes interact, like the way that Venom, they were sort of showing how Venom worked and how Spider-Man was sort of swinging into and fighting, and Star-Lord. There was something about the way that it was all happening was like not really gelling for me. And it's the first time I've thought that, because up until now, every time I've thought, oh, it's Overwatch with Marvel heroes, I'm like, this is going to be phenomenal. Because I want to say that we even saw some stuff in the past where it looked like they just reskinned Overwatch with superheroes, but this didn't. This looked quite different, I thought.
Interesting. But then there's a part of me that wants to play devil's advocate and ask you if there's a bit of a disparity between maybe what you thought at one point and your slightly revised expectations based on a new trailer, and you were uncertain about Marvel's Rivals. What do you think the best way to kind of get to grip, like to formalize your opinion on the game would be?
I just think we need. I think. Do you know what? I think more, just a couple more trailers or some actual gameplay and stuff.
I was going to say by playing it.
Oh yeah, of course. That's the main way, right?
Right, and that is a thing that you will probably do because Marvel Rivals will come out and it will be free.
Yes.
And even if you bounce off it after one session, you'll know. But
No, and you're absolutely right on that. That's the thing that's not going to happen with a game like Concord. You're not going to say, do you know what? Let me take the punt. Let me drop 70 quid. You're going to go, no, I'm obviously going to play Marvel Rivals because it's free to play. I know these characters. Why would I not?
Because I don't want us to have created an environment where a premium PvP FPS title can't exist. But it is. But yeah, like the free-to-play market has never been stronger. Titles that like weren't free-to-play originally, like Overwatch, were at least drastically reduced in price. And games that are premium, the multiplayer is usually one piece of the puzzle. Like as the case of Call of Duty and things like that. It's just I don't know. I just don't know.
But then of course, anytime I think about Marvel, my brain just goes to Avengers.
Right. Yes.
And then I'm just like, what an absolute travesty that was.
I mean, it was a train wreck. Yeah.
There we go. Next up, we had Until Dawn. I'm sure everyone was super excited to see that they could play some more Until Dawn. Every time I see trailers for Until Dawn games, I'm like, oh yeah, they look so fun. I'm going to play it, and I never do. But it looked good. It looked fine. It looked like what you'd expect. It looked like an 80s horror film in a video game.
I mean, I have a sealed copy of this game on a shelf somewhere in my room, and like the idea that they can improve the graphics and the animations, that I'm all of a sudden going to want to play Until Dawn for the first time in my life, I just don't see it happening. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe this will be. Maybe finally, Jamie. Maybe with the enhanced graphics, you'll be like, do you know what? Actually, everyone's playing it online. If people keep streaming it, I'm gonna have to play it. There we go.
We had a bit of that with what was the game that they made? That's I think it was Supermassive. Made The Quarry. We ended up playing of. As the SuperShow. So I get it. Like these things do sometimes make a bit of a wave across streaming platforms and video platforms, and sometimes they do make sense to play when you've got as a content creator that there is it delivers that kind of experience and that engagement that you wouldn't want to have with an audience. But Other than that, like I didn't play a single entry in the Dark Pictures anthology. I only played the Quarry because we played it a little bit for the channel. I'm just not that guy. Mostly because I'm a bit of a pussy, but I'm not afraid to admit it.
But like I said, I've thought about playing it for often, and when I see it, I'm like,
Right.
yeah, I'm just being I'm not gonna. This isn't gonna turn the
Hey,
tide. It's not gonna make me
this
suddenly.
could be the one. This could be the one. I'll be interested to see how they price it.
I think
But
I even
never
did
know.
play a little bit of it back in the day when it came out, but like because a mate of mine had it and he was like, "Oh yeah, it needs to play." Was it? I think it was, but he
I
did
mean,
it again.
it was a popular game at the time.
So I
It
think
reviewed well, like it exceeded expectations. Visually, like a pack to punch. Like some of its character animations and performance capture things were really solid for the time. I just don't think it's a game that needs to be remade.
yeah, I get no, I get that, but then maybe it's because. I don't know. I can't think of it. I was going to try. I can't think of anything. Yeah, I'm kind of like, yeah, I think you're right. I don't know why, but hey,
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first game that Sony had unnecessarily remade, and if it sold well, it wouldn't be the first game that Sony had unnecessarily remade that had sold well. So what do we know?
indeed. Well, the next thing we had up was Path of Exile 2, Jamie, which is going to be free to play, and it'll be coming to PlayStation 5 with couch co-op. Are you excited about that? Are you excited about a bit of Path of Exile 2?
I don't know yet. On the one hand, like there's something about the kind of having a solid entry point into the kind of the PoE experience that is somewhat alluring because I just think that Path of Exile kind of got to a point where there was so much going on and there was so much content that it felt a little bit daunting. And I think it also shows really well, like especially as we were still in technically year one of Diablo 4, right? And actually played a little bit of Diablo inside the last month with the kind of the loot overhaul update that they did. And when you see PoE 2 in trailers, you're like, visually this is admittedly going for something very different, but it has a really quite strong look. But it also has a sort of a sense of familiarity with it
Right.
that comes with it, and that's probably just because I've played sort of like 60 or so hours of Diablo 4 in the last 12 months. But I'm definitely intrigued by it, and again, like it being free to play doesn't hurt. We'll see.
Feels like we're
It's one to
saying that a
watch.
lot in this.
Yeah, I
Free to
feel
play is definitely
it pains me. It pains me a little bit every time I say it because fundamentally, I'm more in favor of just traditional premium experiences. But it does give you an opportunity to just try stuff, if nothing else.
Yes, this is very true. But it was that I hear that thing of if something's free, you're the product. I was thinking of that quote.
Yeah, God. You're not wrong though. It does technically apply here.
Next up, we had a fan favorite, Silent Hill 2, is being remade. Konami and Bloober Team will be releasing this October 8th for PC and PlayStation 5, featuring enhanced combat and visuals. You've done me a note on this little doc that we've got here. I haven't read this. What does this say? There was an extra stream with 13 minutes of additional gameplay.
Yeah, there was like a Silent Hill transmission or something that aired directly after the state of play.
I'm not. Do you know what? I saw that actually. The thing about there's going to be a special thing. And I was like, "There's no way I'm sitting and watching that. Like it's already. I don't want to see any more of. I don't know who's the bad guy in Silent Hill 2. I don't know his name. The weird dude.
Are you thinking of Pyramid Head?
No, the one in the trailer for this one. I didn't play Silent Hill 2, but the guy kept lifting up his skirt. Whether it looked like it kept flashing.
You kept lifting up his skirt? I don't know. I've never played Silent Hill 2,
geometric.
So I don't know.
Right. There's some weird.
Is it a bad guy or is it like?
It looked like the bad guy.
An enemy type.
Oh, it was very prominent in the trailer for the remake. He looked like a hat with a dress that kept flashing. I don't even know. I don't know who the
apparently that actually I don't know if I was going to say what I would say what I'm reading here now, but I think it might be a bit of a spoiler.
Oh, don't.
But
No, just in case,
whoever
yeah.
the person lifting up their skirt is, I don't think they are the bad guy of Silent Hill 2.
Oh,
I think they
okay.
might just be an enemy in Silent Hill 2.
Oh, they feature a lot, and the chick in it kept saying, "He's gonna come and get me. I haven't
Wait, you're
been
talking
back."
about the nurse, the nurse cat? I'm trying to think of what. I need to rewatch this trailer and look for the person lifting up their skirt. And maybe I can pause and catch a couple of.
No, it
glimpses.
wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't a skirt. What was it? I don't know. I'll show you after. It was weird. Anyway,
Okay,
and
okay.
I was like thinking, I'm not playing this. I don't like scary games anyway.
I mean, yeah.
It looked cool though. Like I've always thought Silent Hill is a. I played a bit of the first game back in the day, and not on my own. I played with a friend who played it, and then I watched a little bit and was like, wow, I'm not playing this. But yeah. But I'm glad that more Silent Hill is coming out because people lose their minds for Silent Hill, as we've talked about for years and years. So hopefully they'll get their Silent Hill kicks from the Silent Hill 2 remake.
Yeah, hopefully. It's very hard to tell. I think they're a tough crowd to please. And I feel like Bloober Team do have their kind of the odds stacked against them in that there's a part of Silent Hill 2 that just kind of feels like this, like the perfect storm in terms of like when it was made and where the technology was at and the kind of the restrictions of to the technology in some respects. And like, I'm not going to say they stumbled into creating like an iconic psychological horror, but like there's something very unique about Silent Hill 2 that feels incredibly hard to capture while making a game that like is befitting of modern audiences and modern audience expectations. When I watched the extended gameplay that was shown off in the Silent Hill transmission, I think it fared slightly better because you didn't have that trailer effect of we're just going to cut together all the most exciting moments, which inevitably
Right.
lean towards like combat and jump scares and things like that. It does seem like maybe sort of tonally speaking and atmospherically, like they are capturing something that is an approximation of the Silent Hill 2 feel. By yeah, but they're probably struggling. You wonder how many times they've sat there in front of that Resident Evil 2 remake, for example, and just gone like, how the fuck what's our version of this? Like, it must have been incredibly hard to find that answer.
Right.
But I'm curious to see how, especially OG fans, receive it when it comes out.
Yes, no, I'm. I'll be obviously I won't be playing the game because I'm a wimp, but I will be watching the reactions of the fans. So hopefully they get something that they can really sink their teeth into and they enjoy. Talking about the fans, one of the fan favorites of the show was of course Monster Hunter Wilds, which is we've seen before, but we got to see more of in this trailer. The action RPG, which is taking place in a rich and thriving world where you can explore and kill many big old monsters.
That sounds like Monster Hunter.
It does indeed. Is this the Monster Hunter game that you finally take the plunge? Do you reckon?
Probably not. I got quite close with World because it was on home consoles and it looked quite sharp, and whilst there were still some kind of weird fiddly bits around the way multiplayer worked and how easy it was to actually play with your friends, there was an element there of like maybe, and I never did it. I'll be interesting to see how some of those systems and some of those mechanics present themselves in Wilds, and whether or not, again, it's another step in the right direction in terms of modernizing or sanding down or smoothing some of the rougher edges of the Monster Hunter franchise. But at the same time, there's such a vast number of people who don't care about that or don't want what I want from a series like Monster Hunter. Like, I want Monster Hunter to become simpler and more accessible, and there are
Right.
millions of people who are happy with Monster Hunter just the way it is. It is a series that I continually underestimate in terms of the size of that audience, and I don't really want to step on anyone's toes. So I'm happy for them to just get the Monster Hunter game that they want, and I'll watch from a very safe distance. I'm cool with it being one of those franchises that I just don't have a relationship with.
You might, to be fair, you might get that from Wild. So they've actually said about it that every locale, monster, and person acts with their own thoughts and motivations, combining dynamically to bring an immersive and constantly changing Monster Hunter ecosystem to life, which sounds good. It sounds like there's going to be less of that sort of like stop-start, trying to get to grips with the way and more of a living open world, I suppose. And they've said
Sure.
when you encounter a large monster while out exploring, you'll be able to seamlessly begin a quest, allowing for deeper immersion. Your hunter will also engage with other characters in full voice conversations, deepening your connection with many people that you meet along the way. Sounds good.
That also sounds positive. Hearing the word seamless is encouraging in the way they describe that experience. So I'll keep an eye on it. I've bounced off every Monster Hunter game that I've ever played. The closest I've come to liking a Monster Hunter game was when I played, and I think even we played it for a certain amount of time. That free to play Monster Hunter clone.
Yes.
That name escapes me.
Begin with a D. I can't remember.
Keep going. I feel like you're close. I've got it, but I want to test you because it does begin with a D. Yeah.
Dar something. Dar.
You got the first two letters now.
I can't remember, and this is really boring for people.
Was it? Dauntless.
Dauntless. That was a good game.
Dauntless. But
Dauntless.
But Dauntless was like a reduction of everything that makes Monster Hunter, and it was the most I've ever liked one of those games, which I feel kind of embarrassed to admit, but it's true.
So I think that one of the things that made me, because I tried to dip my toe into Monster Hunter a while ago, and the thing that got me was as you're saying, it was like kind of was a bit inaccessible in the way that it had all these systems that it wanted me to interact with, and like the camping and the cooking and the collecting and all this, and I was just like, excuse me. I was like, I don't want any of this. I want a game that feels something more akin to like oh god,
Dauntless.
No, more like what is it called? Colossus.
Shadow of the Colossus.
Shadow of the Colossus. I just wanted to ride around in a nice big open world, find a big thing, and then kill it, and then go, oh, well done, you've killed it. Now go kill this thing. Whereas it was trying to make me interact and get on board with all of its RPG systems, and I was like, man, do I have to do this? So when they're talking about more immersion, a world that's maybe more hustling and bustling and just going about itself, maybe there will be more of an element to that, but it does remain to be seen. So fingers crossed.
Yeah.
And then last up, we've talked about it, Jamie. I think you even said about it the week before when we were talking about games that we'd like to see coming to PlayStation. Astro Bot by Team Asobi will be released September 6th for PlayStation 5, and it's going to feature over 80 levels across 6 galaxies, and is going to be the most ambitious Astro Bot game you've ever seen. I was hyped for this, I'm not going to lie. This looked very cool, very fun. Yeah. And then immediately after it ended, the trailer ended and the show ended, and I stopped watching, I was a little bit sad that one of the most exciting things that I saw in that entire show was a PlayStation showcase man on a PlayStation controller flying around on a PlayStation 5, and it made me kind of go, oh, it would have been nice if there was that wasn't linked to, like, it was so hard linked to the PlayStation. Like, why am I getting super excited about a little showcasey bot? Do you know what I mean? It just made me kind of go meh.
I did have that same reaction for you. Like, my excitement and hype for this game has remained sky high since I watched this trailer. But I do kind of know what you're getting at. Like, one sort of, for example, one thing you could read into the subtext of this game being as exciting a prospect as it is that it's a startling reminder that 3.5, almost 4 years into the life cycle of the PlayStation 5, the free piece of software that most of us played as our first ever PS5 experience is still one of the most compelling pieces of software available on that entire platform. Yeah. Like, if you wanted to lead into that as the subtext for why this game is so exciting and why that itself is inherently kind of depressing, I would get what you meant.
It's because it's almost an air of like, no, I think you're right, because then you have this element that they were saying to not only to us, the players, what the PlayStation 5 is capable of and what can be done with the haptics and, and all of that. But like they were, saying maybe to developers or future developers, prospective developers, look at what this machine's capable of, look at all the different stuff you can do. Go at it, like, make some incredible experiences. And it seems like maybe some developers just never stepped up to the plate and did that, and so now Asobi are doing it with they're making their own Astro Bot game to be like, god damn it, guys. But then every time in that showcase it has like the DualSense 5 controller, or it has the not DualSense. What's it called? Just the DualSense.
So it's called
DualSense
the
controller.
DualSense.
Or you have like the actual PlayStation 5 where like he's
Sure.
Astro Bot's riding on it. It just makes me think like they're just little reminders that this hasn't been capitalized upon in the way that it should have been. That I was hoping that it would have been. Maybe.
Yeah, yeah. That's fair. That's fair. Uh, I, that said, I kind of got the impression that the presence of those peripherals and that hardware in the trailer, much like the presence of some other characters from various PlayStation IPs that have a presence in the trailer, like that it wasn't so much like a suggestion that this would also continue on Astrobot's lineage of being like a showcase for what the PS5 is capable of. It would just be like a fully fledged game that exists within that world. Like just because he was
That
flying on a
included that stuff.
yeah, just because he was flying on a DualSense, I didn't read into that and say this is going to be a Sobe showing people what the DualSense is really capable of. Like
Right.
they did that 3.5 years ago, and I don't think they're going to kind of bang that drum too much again. I think as you kind of talked about the number of levels and the size of the world. I think this was just about blowing up what was one of my favorite platformers in recent memory, and just kind of allowing it to kind of fill out the stage in a way that it really deserved, based on the impressions that gave people, not just in Astro's Playroom, but also in the Rescue Mission or whatever it was called in VR, which was always critically acclaimed. And sadly, I never got to play in its entirety. But I was totally enamored with everything I saw here. It was bright and it was colourful and it was varied, and I was looking at things and saying, I want to do that.
It did look very cool.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal trailer, and like we've said, there are a few different ways that you could look at a Astro Bot within the context of the PlayStation portfolio, and it could be sort of a little bit damning that it is so exciting and that so much does seem to hinge on a guy that has kind of just filled the slot of being a PlayStation mascot seemingly out of nowhere in the course of this generation. But I'll remain optimistic, and I won't be kind of a Debbie Downer about the whole thing, and just say that like this immediately becomes one of my most anticipated games of this year. I want to platinum it like I platinumed Astro's Playroom. I want there to be more kind of weird, sort of wanking over PlayStation nostalgia like there was in Astro's Playroom. I want to zoom in on the serial code for an old console and all that kind of stuff. I want to do all of that shit again, and more, and for longer. And that's why I was as excited as I was about this trailer. That I had a smile on my face the whole time.
At this point, I need to bring in from our audience in the chat, Classy Cat, who, for one, when I was saying about I want to, the type of Monster Hunter game I want to play, he said Dragon's Dogma 2, Jonesy. That's what you need to play. Fair enough.
I mean, to be fair, he's kind of right. Based on you describing you wanting a Shadow of the Colossus style experience, that is kind of like a weird amalgamation between the two.
Well, there you go. I'm going to play some Dragon's Dogma 2. However, though, I want to get your response to his next comment, which was talking about Astrobot, saying it doesn't have a compelling world or character like Mario.
Well, I don't disagree, but I think it's getting there. I think the thing about like mascots and platform mascots, and even if you got away from mascots and just looked at characters and world and platforms, I think. Like, funny, we had the conversation about Concord and saying when it comes to introducing people to a universe and to a world and to characters, you have to start somewhere. You have to acknowledge at some point they're not going to know you, and at some point, and at the next point they are. And it's incredibly difficult to go toe to toe with the quintessential video game mascot, with the face of video games as an art form, as a medium, with someone like Mario, who has decades of history on Astrobot. And so I don't know if I necessarily feel like it's a comparison that needs to be made. What I would praise Astrobot for is the really encouraging amount of progress it has made in such a relatively short amount of time. This is this is a game that, if you ignore the kind of the announcement of Astrobot and the trailer that we all just saw, that prior to this, it was a VR title on a headset that a lot of people didn't own relative to the number of people that owned a PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 4 Pro. And it was a piece of software that came as a pack-in for the PS5, which as fun as beautiful and as engaging as a lot of us found it, there are probably plenty of people who and I know some of them who bought a PS5 because they want to play Call of Duty and FIFA, and you tell them, yeah, play Astro's Playroom, and they go, yeah, okay, I'm 37, I've got better things to do with my life than play some game where a robot jumps around. So when you consider that those are the two pieces of software that existed prior to this trailer, how far Astro has come in terms of establishing himself as a mascot, and I know that he was involved in Playroom and Playroom VR, and that we've seen Astro Bots as a concept existing across other things. I get that, but I think the amount of work that they've done to to establish Astro Bot as a mascot and the world that he inhabits in such a short period of time and such few pieces of software is incredibly encouraging. And I also think they've also got a really powerful shorthand available to them that it does seem like they're tapping back into with Astro Bot, which is PlayStation nostalgia. But like, part of the reason that Astro Bot Astro's Playroom was as compelling as it was because you were running around and you were seeing Easter eggs and references to titles and games that you remembered. You were seeing direct acknowledgements and references to the console that you had just bought and were incredibly excited about, from its GPU to its SSD and so on and so forth, very literally being acknowledged. And all of those levels ended with those magnificent, like eye-catching love letters to the OSs and the dashboards of the previous PlayStation consoles, and like walking out at like the end of I think it was the ice-based world in Astro's Playroom, and realizing you're in like the PS3 land, and you hear like the orchestral startup, and like the wavy things are appearing in the sky, and like it sends shivers down your spine. And is that a bit of a cheat or a shortcut when it comes to establishing a universe or a world that people care about? Yes, but does it work? Yes, absolutely. Like, who didn't have a little moment when they saw Parappa the Rapper in this trailer? And if that's what a team Asobi and PlayStation are going to use to kind of accelerate or fast track Astro Bot into the hearts and minds of PlayStation fans, then I'm all for it.
Well said. Well said. And there's a lot of people who agree with you, actually, because the Astrobot trailer has done very well. It's been almost universally praised, getting 99% likes on YouTube at time of recording. It had 23,405 likes versus just 245 dislikes. I should say, unfortunately, on the inverse to that, Concord, the Concord trailer has received an overwhelmingly negative response with only 18% likes on YouTube, 2,735 likes versus 12,070 dislikes. But that is the end of our rundown from the state of play from PlayStation. We should say that, I think, as you could probably tell from our reaction and what we think of it, response has been pretty mixed. There's been a number of people sort of a bit disappointed with the lack of like first party games they were hoping to see from PlayStation. We were talking last week about potential of sort of Ghost of Tsushima 2, or even maybe some murmurings from some other of their big titles that didn't materialize. But there is also speculation that there will be a showcase that could take place in September. So it could just be that whatever wasn't here has been delayed and will be pushed back to then. So it might not be the end. They have to. It gets a weird situation, doesn't it, this time of year, because they're trying to work out when to show certain things, and they know that Xbox, and they know that Ubisoft, and they know that EA are going to do a whole bunch of stuff between now and then. And so it's, what do you announce and when? And you want to be in people's minds, and you want people talking about you, so you don't want to like blow your load too early on in the summer, and then everyone forgets about you and starts talking about other things. So it is an interesting time, obviously, to do all of that, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always going to be a bit of a chess battle this time of year, as you're sort of balancing out the strength of your announcements versus the strength of your rivals' announcements, and also just like the extent to which the stars have aligned on the things that you have available and the things that you have to talk about and what would be appropriate to talk about. And context is very important. And the problem is, with this state of play, there are so many interesting pieces of context that some of them begin to sound contradictory. Like, some people have said that this was a perfectly fine state of play because it was a random state of play that took place in late May, that was announced with 24 hours notice. If you weren't a weirdo that was tracking, leaks and rumors and stuff like that. You had no idea what was popping up. It had a little bit of something for everyone, whether you're a Silent Hill person or a Monster Hunter person or an Astro Bot person, and so on and so forth. Uh, and you probably had an okay time. And then there are other people sat there going, yes, but this time last year they had a showcase which was an hour and a half long and bookended by first party titles. Even that was disappointing. They haven't done anything in the year since then to kind of like make amends for that. And for all I know, they want me to buy a professional variant of their console in 4 months, 5 months. And you don't get me excited for that with Concord. With all due respect, you don't. Like that, you don't launch a console with Concord. And admittedly, Concord comes out months before that console theoretically would, so not necessarily something they're asking of players. But it all depends on context and sort of like what.
No,
your
but I think
view
you're
is.
right though. It's a fact you had to get to the point where you're like, what are the two titles that you're looking forward to playing on the PlayStation 5 Pro? And it's Concord and Astro Bot, which is then like
Right, but both of which, if you're actually excited for them, you'll play Concord in August and Astro Bot in September. Like they're not PS5 Pro titles.
so.
So,
In September, the showcase is that when they drop some PS5 Pro. You need the Pro to play the best version of this game.
I think there has to be something, and it doesn't all have to be first party. They've shown in the last 12 months alone. Even if you look at like this year with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Stellar Blade and stuff like that, like they can cut deals and they can make they can make the PlayStation 5 Pro appealing in other ways. There's still sort of the people talking about GTA 6, for example, and who's going to get co-marketing rights for that. It will probably be almost certainly it's going to be Sony. They were launching showcases for the PS5 with footage of GTA 5 running on the PS4. Like they have a very healthy relationship, and I'm sure that will continue. And I'm sure positioning in some respects the PS5 Pro as the place to play GTA 6 will be enough for some people at Sony. But there are plenty of people who want to see something more. Could they come back in September and show that more? Yeah, very possibly. But I think that there's something really unusual going on with Sony and PlayStation's first party kind of portfolio or slate at the moment, in that it feels like the most out of sync they've ever been with their audience. When you line up what's clearly being developed and what's ready to show and what stage of development it's at, and the appetite for those products, where the appetite feels like ravenous. People want those games and they want them now, or they want to see them and know they exist now. And PlayStation still, you're biting their tongue. And I say bite still because, again, as I referenced, they had that showcase this time last year, and I was disappointed. I rewatched it. Do you know what the last thing they showed was before that Spider-Man 2 was their closer? It was a trailer for the Gran Turismo movie. Like that's the thing they were putting in showcases last year, and then this year we flash forward and we don't even have one. So something feels off, and I think that the thing that is creating that kind of off feeling, it's two things. I think development times are obviously getting longer, and some players, myself included at times, are just not adjusting well to that. But I think also, even when we allow ourselves to acknowledge that development times are getting longer, there are still inconsistencies in terms of how long certain things are being taken to turn around. If we focused on PlayStation first party for a second, and I apologize if I'm rambling, but like Spider-Man, that was 2018 to 2022, so that was 4 years. God of War was Spider-Man was 2018 to 2023, so that was 5 years. God of War was 2018 to 2022, so that was 4 years. Horizon was 2017 to 2022, so that was 5 years. When you look at that kind of like 4 to 5 year range, that would mean that Sony Bend, who did Days Gone in 2019, Bluepoint, who were there for launched the PS5 with Dark Souls in 2020, Sucker Punch with Ghost of Tsushima 2020, Naughty Dog: The Last of Us Part 2 2020. Our body clock almost is telling us time for those studios, and yet everyone's going, well, hang on, no, like wait longer. And part of me is like, that's fine, but I'm also like, what's the rationale here? And there are also marketing inconsistencies that increase the disparity between what we feel like we should expect and what we're being told to expect.
Right.
When on the one hand, Astro Bot, which was the best thing that Sony had to show in terms of their own output at this state of play, as being announced just over 3 months before release. When you go back to 2021, I think, the showcase, they announced Spider-Man 2 and Marvel's Wolverine at the same time. They announced Marvel's Wolverine before they announced Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Like, they announced the game they were going to develop after the game they finished developing, the game that you don't actually technically know about yet. And then, I don't know, this isn't first party, it's some weird tangential relationship thing, but we sat there in January and watched the state of play where Kojima gave us a trailer for Death Stranding 2, a 2025 game, and then afterwards, he stood in front of the camera with Herman Holst saying, I'm also going to make an action espionage game, codenamed Fizzint, after I've developed Death Stranding 2. Which, like, if Death Stranding 2 is a 2025 game and Fizzint is being developed after Death Stranding 2, then, spoiler alert, Fizzint is a PlayStation 6 game. They announced a PlayStation 6 game in January, and, like,
That's probably not going to come out until like 2033 or something.
Exactly. And yet some people are sitting there with arms folded going, well, of course you're not going to know what the Sony Bend are making. Days Gone only came out 5 years ago. It's like, no, that's normal. Like, and
put a game out.
There are enough white whales out there that I don't want people everyone's got their own Silk Song or their own Metroid Prime 4 or or their own Elder Scrolls 6. Everyone's got their own thing where, like, man, they really did announce that game and say nothing about it.
Well, they didn't announce Half-Life
3. They did. Well, yeah. But you and I were in LA and watched the Elder Scrolls 6, the logo appear before our eyes live in real time. That was 6 years ago, Jonesy. And there's been nothing since. I'm not saying I want more of that. I'm just saying that I feel like PlayStation, through disparities in development times, some of which have stayed short and some of which have clearly grown, and marketing strategies, some of which emphasize quick turnarounds and some of which are clearly far more relaxed, they've created a weird disparity where the audiences don't feel as informed as they used to. And clearly, like I said, I know it's a weird thing to say about it, but body clocks feel out of sync. And there is a growing number of people, especially with the PS5 Pro looming large, backstage. There's a growing number of people who feel like that it's time to see what Naughty Dog and Sucker Punch and Bluepoint and Bend and so on and so forth are doing next. And Sony are keeping their cards close to their chest. And the fucked up thing about all of this is that it's marketing. It's advertisements. It's advertisements for products that we all technically know exist. We just want to know more about them because we're weirdo little gamers. Neil Druckmann did an interview with the New York Times this past week where he referred to Naughty Dog as working on multiple single-player titles. They're probably working on something akin to a Last of Us Part 3 and something else entirely. Those aren't wild guesses. We probably knew that in the same way it wasn't a wild guess to say that Rockstar were making GTA 6, however many years ago people started saying that. We knew, we just didn't quote unquote know. And so there's a part of me that acknowledges that all we're getting wound up about is marketing and commercials that confirm and validate theories that we've already got. But at the same time, they're exciting. And I do love me a commercial. I do love me an advert.
No, I think you're right though, and you made a good point. Like when you can have someone promoting a Fizzint, a game that's not even in development until the game's come out, and it's years and years and years away, and then you've got companies that are obviously working on stuff but just not talking about it. It's bizarre because it's like, why announce a game that you've not even started working on yet that you've just decided you're going to make in 10 years when you're not talking, someone else isn't talking about a game they're 3 to 4 years into development of already. And it just kind of makes you think, I think it kind of gives you a weird disparity where you then think, well, hold on, if they announce games before they're even working on them, then does that mean that something's not being worked on by these people? Does it mean they're not doing this? And until you hear them say it, I don't think you can assume it's being made. Like that's why, like you're saying, Elder Scrolls 6. So many people are super keen for that, but the fact that they've shown a logo for it and people are like, oh, they are working on it. you that gives you a little bit more of you can like relax a little bit on the fact that you're so keen for an Elder Scrolls 6. At least they've acknowledged it. At least they've said the
Right.
words. I'm with
And
you. I
they
like
got
it. I like them talking about stuff.
and the other thing with Elder Scrolls is that they got out there before it leaked. You know, they got to say the words Elder Scrolls 6 before Jeff Grubb got to say the words Elder Scrolls 6. And that is
Right.
also something, that's also of some note in this day and age with the way things are going.
Well, so also
I don't know.
the other side of the coin though is we like can't wait to hit just the title, just them to say the name of the game and the number, and we're like, oh my god, it's going to be amazing. Like Last of Us 3, they've said Last of Us 3, they said the words. You saw Ellie's character play a guitar in a trailer. I'm so excited. But then on the other side of that, you talk about a game like Starfield, when you're waiting 8 years for a game to come out and you're super excited and you've had all of that, you've had the name of the game, you've had marketing stuff, and the game comes out and everyone goes, meh, that wasn't very great. So it's this weird relationship that we have with marketing. Well, we're more excited about the marketing than we actually are for the games themselves. It's becoming weird.
I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but it's not throwing you under the bus. It's just interesting. But I remember we experienced that firsthand a little bit with God of War Ragnarok, where I think it was the September 2020 showcase where they were like God of War Ragnarok, and they just did the circle, and it was Ragnarok is coming, and I think it's a 2021. And a year later, around the time that they had initially pitched as the release date, it became clear that that game wasn't going to come out, and we got another trailer. And I remember that trailer was the only thing we had to go on for such an additionally long period of time that you had actually taken to like conjuring up some almost conspiracy theories about like where that game was at and how far it was from being announced. Like
I said it was going to get pushed
date.
for like at least. I think they're going to push it again for like another year. I think I said.
Yeah, and I get it. Like marketing strategies are not only are they probably incredibly difficult to come up with, but yeah, like individual games, individual series and franchises probably do warrant and benefit from their own marketing strategies. There is no reason to tell us about Astro Bot 2 years ago and have us waiting for this September. Like this 3-month turnaround time, it was absolutely fine. But like I said, context is everything, and Xbox. We'll see for ourselves inside the next week, but it feels like they've gotten to a position where when you write down the list of Xbox studios that they have kind of first party now, and the projects that they're all working on, and how long some of those projects have been around for, you look at a showcase like the one they're going to put on in the next couple of days and go, even conservatively, like they'll have a hell of a lot of things there that are only going to be on their platform. And some of them are very big, and some of them are very small. Some of them are unknown quantities, but that's fine. And with PlayStation, you're like, we just got their state of play, the one that they chose to put on like the week before the biggest week in gaming, and first party they showed us Concord and Astro Bot. And like Concord is the kind of game. Put it this way, Concord would look a lot more palatable if it were in a showcase like Xbox's, because there'd be such a broad range of software and titles and genres there, and everything would be backed up with the fact that you can essentially try it risk-free with Game Pass, that it wouldn't look weird, but it creates a disparity. And I'm not trying to suggest that this late May state of play was meant to go tete-a-tete with any of what we're about to see in the next week. But yeah, it does feel like something's a little bit missing on the Sony side, and I'm not just being a fanboy. I'm a little bit being a fanboy, but I think it's not just purely being a fanboy when I say I would love for them to come back in September and say, we got a new console coming out in 2 months, here it is, and here are the reasons why you're going to want to adopt it inside the next 12 months. But I don't think that's unreasonable.
Because now I'm going to get all excited that that's what they are going to do, and then they're not going to do it.
It kind of feels like they have to. And I think it's telling that Concord and Astro Bot both come out 2 to 3 months before any console would launch. Like there has to be something. There has to be something. Like you don't know an Xbox One X and which launched with like a port of PUBG and that was it. I don't think you could do that for the PS5 Pro. But maybe I'm wrong.
We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait till September and see what they say. But that is the end of our podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody out there. Thank you, Jamie, so much for co-hosting. for being here, for giving us your
pleasure.
knowledge.
Apologies for my for any sneezes or the blowings of a nose or nasal voices that offended anyone out there.
I'm sure, along with me, everyone out there will wish you go get some Lemsip, get some good sleep, and get healthy as soon as possible.
What if I were to tell you that I have to work for like the next 3 to 4 hours before I can even go to bed?
Oh God.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope you don't. I hope you. I don't know. I'm done. I don't know what to say.
Die?
Yeah. I hope you survive it. There we go.
Let's go bare minimum.
Well, yeah, we will keep you informed, people out there, about what you're going to see us and hear from us in the next couple of weeks. We'll be here obviously next week, but hopefully we might be able to fit some extra stuff in with these little showcases and some Game Fest and things that are happening. So check the Discord, and we'll keep you posted.
I'm glancing over the timings now. I think the main things are like you've got things like Summer Game Fest and Devolver Direct are on Friday night UK time. You've got things like the Xbox Showcase, which is on Sunday evening UK time. Ubisoft on the Monday evening. So there's a few things we hope if we tune in for one of them, that'd be nice.
Do a little co-stream. There we go. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. And yeah, we'll